I've never liked midnight calls, especially the ones with no caller ID, just a simple line of text. Move out now. Urgent situation. No questions asked. The room fell silent except for the wind whistling through the crack in the door and the dim light from the nightstand lamp in the corner. Claire lay with her back to me, her breathing slow, steady. I dressed in my uniform in the dark, each movement careful, a habit etched into muscle memory. But when I leaned down to kiss her shoulder lightly, Claire just shivered slightly and whispered, "Be careful. No turning back. No who. No holding me back like all the times before." On the way to the military airfield, I felt a chill colder than the Virginia sky outside. The wind lashed against the window pane like unseen warnings. But I pushed it aside. Only one thing mattered. The mission was the mission. The flight to Yemen was 17 hours long. No one spoke the entire way. Only the drone of the engines and the averted gazes of the officers with me. One of them, Lieutenant Colonel Mason, handed me a thin file, unusually slim for an emergency extraction operation. "This is the entire op order." I asked, my eyes fixed on just 4 pages. Mason didn't answer right away. He just spoke softly, his voice flat, programmed. "Just remember one thing. If things go sideways, there's no turning back. No extraction." I stared at him for a long moment, but said nothing. I was agency. I understood strange orders, directives that smelled of calculation. But this time, something felt different, as if I was the one being watched, not the one leading the mission. The Yemeni sky was thick with dust when we landed. The makeshift base was tucked against the mountainside, just enough light for a closed-door briefing. Jude Mercer, once my closest friend in the unit, walked into the room. He avoided my gaze, picked up a pen, and signed the deployment roster without a word. "Something wrong?" I asked. Jude shook his head, lips pressed tight. "No, you're the commander. You run the show." I remember that feeling clearly. A kind of silence born not of respect, but of concealment. The night before the operation, I called Claire. The connection crackled. She picked up after the 6th ring. "No, I miss you. No, when are you coming home?" Just one sentence. "Remember to keep your distance." Distance? I thought I'd misheard. But before I could ask again, the line went dead. I didn't sleep. Neither did the team. There was something in the air, like the smell of rusted metal mixed with unspent gunpowder. We moved out at 0400 local time. The sky was pitch black, as if waiting for something terrible. The target location was a small village near the border, supposedly holding a figure connected to terrorist financing. Stepping into the first house, I noticed the abnormality. No people, no signs of resistance. Everything was eerily silent. I signaled to Jude, who was behind me, but when I turned back, he was gone. "Jude? Report position." No answer. "Bravo team, confirm coordinates." Still no signal. Only the wind whistling through the mud brick walls. And then, gunfire. Not from inside the village, but from behind, where I just come from. The first bullet whizzed past my ear. I hit the sand, a searing pain in my left shoulder. Blood soaked through my shirt. I crawled behind the rusted shell of a Jeep, trying the internal comms again. No one answered. "Jude, Mason, anyone copy?" Static. Then I heard the chopper. Not coming to save me. Leaving. The whine of the rotors churning the air made the ground tremble. I saw it, the evac chopper, lifting off, its back turned to me. "Stop. I'm still here." I screamed, a choked sob caught in my throat, but it was useless. In that moment, the physical pain vanished. I felt the pain of the silence. They didn't hear me. Or rather, they didn't want to hear me. I lay in the sand, blood pooling beneath me, watching the helicopter disappear into the haze. Only the distant sound of the sea remained, like a mocking lullaby. I thought of Claire. Her eyes that morning. Not sad, not worried, just empty. She knew. I couldn't name it then, but deep down I understood. I wasn't abandoned in an accident. I was eliminated by design. And that was just the beginning. I didn't die. But the man who crawled out of the sand that day wasn't me anymore. He was something they would soon have to face. Because I wasn't coming back to live. I was coming back to take back everything. I woke up in a rotting wooden hut, leaky roof, light filtering through cracks thin as thread. My whole body ached like I'd been gutted. My throat was raw, chest tight with every breath. The smell of salt water, fish, and something old seeped into my lungs like a harsh symphony. I don't remember how long I lay there. only that I was still alive. And that was the strangest thing. Beside me was an old wooden bowl with some water and what looked like thin potato gruel. A figure sat not far away, stooped back, hair gray as ash, face weathered by years of sea wind. He didn't speak, just occasionally glanced at me with eyes the murky brown of charred wood. I met all kinds in the service, traitors, loyalists, the selfish, but the old man's gaze gave me pause. Not because he seemed kind or trustworthy, but because he needed nothing from me. It took nearly a week before I could stand. Each step sent jolts of pain deep into my spine. My left shoulder muscles were torn, stitched with coarse thread. My right thigh was still black and blue, the hip joint barely movable. There was no mirror, but looking at my reflection in the water by the hut's entrance, I didn't recognize the man staring back. One time, as I struggled to lift a bucket of water, the old man handed me a small pouch. Inside are my dog tags, still stained with dried blood, mottled like an unspoken sentence. "Where did you find these?" I asked. He didn't answer, just looked at me for a moment, then turned away, as if unwilling to repeat something even I couldn't bear to hear. I lay there all night, turning the tags over and over in my hand. My name, unit, blood type were clearly etched. But what sent a chill down my spine was a small detail on the back, a deep scratch, round like a bullet mark. It wasn't natural wear. Someone had marked it deliberately. I knew the protocol. If a soldier falls and the body can't be recovered, tags are left near the scene as proof of identity. They'd done it. To me, not because they had to, but because they wanted the world to believe I was dead. One night, the rain came down hard, the tide rose high, waves crashed against the shore as if trying to wash away this tiny hut. I sat on the porch, staring into the darkness. The fear was gone. Only one question echoed in my head. Why? What had I done wrong? I'd saved countless lives in over 15 years of service. I never retreated, never disobeyed an order. So why would my own comrades, men I'd called brothers, leave me behind like expired goods? Then I thought of Claire, her expression the night before I left. Her cold hand, the hug without strength, the warning to keep your distance. At the time, I thought she was just worried like always. Now I knew. Something inside her had already shut down. I didn't know if surviving was luck or punishment. There were moments I wanted to end it all, walk into the sea, let the waves take me, stop thinking. But then I remembered an old saying only the deeply wounded understand. Sometimes silence is the loudest evidence. No one looked for me. No search order. No death notice sent home. Not a single tear shed by the system I'd sworn loyalty to. And that's when I understood. I wasn't lost. I wasn't forgotten. I was erased. Erased from the records. Erased from memory. Erased from history. They didn't want me dead because I failed. They wanted me gone because my existence was a threat. A few days later, I managed to walk to the shore by myself for the first time, using a wooden stick, limping across the hot sand. I sat there, watching the restless water, the wind whipping my face, and I whispered like an oath, "I'm not dead. And when I come back, no one sleeps easy." I left the seaside hut after more than 2 months of living like a ghost. No papers, no weapon, no clear purpose, just one name echoing in my head every night. Claire. On my last night there, the old man who saved my life just looked at me, a long, steady gaze, then gave a slight nod. No advice. None needed. Some people don't say much, but their eyes hold recognition, something I hadn't received from anyone since that helicopter flew away. I crossed borders like a salt smuggler, borrowed a fake ID from a car dealer in southern Jordan, climbed onto a dusty bus, then found my way back toward the Mexican border. A week later, I stepped into a dusty town near the Texas border, a place where dreams and nightmares alike were masked by the smell of gasoline and the click of keyboards. I lived in a cramped room behind a rundown internet cafe, peeling walls, network cables snaking around like dried veins. The chair I sat in was so hard my back ached after half an hour. But it had what I needed: connection. The computer I used had a sticky S key and a non-functioning right mouse button. It took almost 2 hours to bypass basic firewalls and access an old forum for SEAL veterans. I typed the name Nathan Cole into the search bar. No results. I tried code names, unit numbers. Names of past missions. Still nothing. It felt like searching for my own name on a tombstone and finding it blank. Not because I never existed, but because someone had scrubbed every trace. I sat there, stunned. My hands clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. For a moment, I wanted to smash the damn computer. But then I remembered something. Claire once mentioned she kept her old email account, even though I'd told her she should delete it. I tried logging in. The old password, Coffee Befarecos. An inside joke, because I always started my day with black coffee, and she was the chaos bringer before sunrise. I didn't expect it to work, but it opened. The inbox was sparse. Just a few emails from shopping brands, and one particular message from about 6 months ago, sent from an address named Mercer.family.gala. I clicked it. The image loaded slowly, as if trying to delay what I was about to see. And then it appeared. Claire, in a long black dress, stood next to a man in navy dress uniform. Medals gleamed on his chest, his smile wide, confident, his eyes claiming the room as his own. Jude Mercer. Claire's arm was linked through his. A new ring sat on her finger. That wasn't what hurt the most. What stole my breath was the little girl standing between them. About 6 years old, pale blonde hair, wide gray eyes. In the photo, she wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking up at her mother with an innocent, almost adoring gaze. I couldn't breathe. I enlarged the photo, zoomed in on the girl's wrist. A pink plastic bracelet, engraved, Lena C. Mercer. I clicked through a few more photos. A garden party, a trip to the park, a shop by the front door of a house numbered 1477. It was the life I dreamed of, with a woman I believed would wait for me. But that dream was now someone else's reality. I leaned back against the wall, cold sweat trickling down my spine. That little girl, if she was 6 now, that meant she was born while I was still alive. Before the mission, before everything fell apart. I didn't know what to call the feeling, not quite anger, not quite sadness. It was like being ripped out of the world you thought was real and thrown into another universe where everything continued, just without you in it. I didn't cry. It was too late for that. I just sat there silently, staring at Claire's face, her smile in the photo. The smile I once thought was reserved for me. Now it belonged to someone else. And worse, maybe it never truly belonged to me at all. The wind chimes outside tinkled. A kid rode past the cafe on a bike, blonde hair, red t-shirt. I watched him, a fleeting image that made my own heart ache. I remembered that feeling, being needed by someone, being called dad. I'd never heard Lena say my name. Never held her. But just one look and I knew. A part of me had been hidden by Claire. Not because she didn't know its importance, but because she knew it was important enough to need erasing forever. I didn't know if the girl was mine. But I knew one thing more certainly than anything else. Claire hadn't just moved on. She'd started a new life before I even disappeared. And that was the moment I stopped being a victim. I stood up, walked out of the internet cafe, carrying nothing but the name Mercer echoing in my head. Not for immediate revenge, not to reclaim what was lost, but to understand the full depth of the betrayal. Because whether you want forgiveness or destruction, first you have to know, how deep does the truth go? Nights in Texas were unlike anywhere else I'd been. Not exactly cold, but the wind had a hardness to it, like it was soaked in road dust, gunpowder, and unspoken lies. I rented a room right off the highway. The window faced a dilapidated truck stop, neon lights flickering all night, but never bright enough for anyone to see faces clearly. I needed that dimness. Needed to hide like a shadow. In the corner of the room sat the old computer I'd bought from a nearby phone repair shop. I removed the hard drive, installed a new SSD, loaded an OS from a modified ghost image designed to leave no trace. Each step felt familiar, instinctual. Only this time, I wasn't accessing systems to save anyone. I went back to the encrypted military forum where veterans shared intel, layered with encryption. My old account was wiped clean, but I remembered secondary access commands. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, just that something had gone unsaid, and then I saw it, a short string of code hidden within a seemingly unrelated conversation thread. The text was blurred, but I knew I'd just touched something big. Blue Harvest, status, active. I read the words over and over. In my head, each syllable sounded like a nail being hammered into a coffin lid. Blue Harvest. I'd never heard the name. Not in any official report I'd reviewed, not in any operational catalog, not part of any logistics campaign I participated in. I opened a few more hidden data streams, traced IPs, used proxies to track the origin. It led me to an internal system linked to internal target elimination activities, not taking out terrorists, not assassinating criminals, but erasing our own people. The screen displayed a heavily encrypted data schematic, but not entirely unfamiliar. I'd worked with counter-intel. I knew the things hidden best were often the things never meant to exist in reports. I accessed a file named status log, Graves/alt. Graves was my name, but what chilled me wasn't the name itself, but the alt. In intel jargon, alt could mean alternate, a contingency scenario, or a backup designed to replace the original. I hadn't just been eliminated. I'd been replaced. I zoomed in on the timeline. There was an entry dated over 2 years ago. Transition alpha phase to beta. Activate contingency plan. Below it, a note. Leave no trace. No confirmed kill. No media echo. I felt something tightening in my chest. They didn't kill me conventionally. They redefined my death, and I'd walked right through it, still alive. But according to the system, I was just an anomaly, yet to be discovered. The room felt smaller. The air thick with the smell of hot plastic, sweat, and helplessness. I had to stand up, pace, my chest feeling like it would explode. I thought of Jude, thought of Claire, thought of the child named Lena. If this was all a plan, who was I in their eyes? Someone redundant? A name to be crossed off so someone else could step up? No, I couldn't accept that. I returned to the computer, digging deeper into the code. There was a secondary access key, reserved for those who'd served in naval special warfare. I tried my old personal code. Access denied. I tried again a third time, then entered a variation, a phrase only my team used, not all ghosts are dead. This time, the door opened. I saw a list. Names like mine. Not soldiers killed in action, but soldiers quietly erased. Some I knew, some I commanded. A few names that appeared in the news, their deaths attributed to training accidents, suicide, lost during mission. But now I knew they all belonged to the same file. Below the list, there was a message line. Direct oversight, V. Crane. Victor Crane. I'd never met him. Only heard the name whispered in hallways without cameras, in meetings without minutes. They called him the hand without a signature. If he was tied to Blue Harvest, this was bigger than I thought. I pulled up his activity map. The data led to several money trails through shell corporations, finally consolidating at an address in Northern Virginia. It wasn't surprising when I saw Claire's name on one transfer line. She received a temporary financial assistance payment of about $85,000, transferred exactly 3 weeks before I left for the mission. I sat frozen for a long time, staring at the screen, but not really seeing. Claire didn't just walk out of my life. She was paid to do it, and I started to understand. This wasn't about love, marriage, or personal betrayal anymore. This was a structure, a selection system, a furnace designed to burn anyone who might expose something. I don't know how long I sat there. Only when a neighbor's clock chimed 2 a.m. did I realize my hands were stiff, cold sweat covering my back. I shut down the computer, not out of fear, but because I needed to hold on to this feeling. The feeling of being turned into a ghost in my own life story. But this time I wasn't leaving. I wasn't running. I would slip through every layer of code, every crack in the system. I would be the ghost they couldn't erase. And when I reappeared, they wouldn't recognize me. Not until the whole truth was laid bare before them. Too naked to deny. There's a kind of silence you only feel after a truth too large has just flooded your mind. No more echoes in your head. No more doubts. Just a space, cold, still, like the surface of water after a stone's been thrown in, settling after the shock. I sat in the motel room, the sickly yellow light from the desk lamp reflecting off the computer screen like an artificial moon. Outside, the rumble of container trucks rolling down the highway and the distant bark of dogs from a neighborhood a few blocks away. Everything was disturbingly normal, as if the world had no idea a name had just been buried for the second time. This time on paper. The file I just opened, full title, Graves deletion/approved, wasn't a clerical error. It was stamped, signed, dated, with authentication codes from 3 different command levels. And the first name on the official confirmation line was Claire's. Claire, Evelyn Mercer, signed under the section Pre-Mission Data Coordination, with a role listed as Domestic Security Liaison Specialist. I read that line no less than 5 times. Each time, my heart beat slower, as if trying to stop blood from flooding back into memory. She didn't just know, she consented, and not passively, not just watching. She was the one who actively picked up the pen, put her name to the decision to erase me from this world. I remembered her handwriting. Claire wrote with a slight leftward slant, fine strokes, always placing her periods higher than normal. At the end of her signature, there was always a diagonal slash, as if to say my mind is made up. The signature in that file was the same. No tremor, no ruse, no hesitation. I clenched my hands until my knuckles cracked. Not from anger, but from emptiness. I used to think the worst pain was betrayal. But no, the worst is when the person you loved more than yourself hurts you with sheer calmness. I opened the next section of the file, final approval. 3 signatures. One from a Navy representative, one from the Defense Security System, and the last, Victor Crane. The signature itself was stark. Just a V and a strong horizontal line. But the authentication code below was clear. Reviewed and approved non-recovery protocol. Subject, Nathan Cole. Status, expendable. I read that word again and again. Expendable, disposable, unnecessary. A pawn on a board they'd set up long before. I used to think I mattered. Now I knew. I was just a line item in a budget. I shut down the machine, stood up, walked out into the narrow hallway. The night air was dry, mixed with the smell of hot plastic and road dust. Above, the moon was full and low, as if watching my every thought. I walked along the roadside, past rows of temporary housing, past a dumpster, past a gas station with no attendant, until I reached an empty lot, where an old, bare tree stood, its dry branches like arms reaching for the sky. I stood under it, pulling a small piece of paper from my pocket. It was a printout of the file Claire had signed. I'd carefully printed it before leaving the room. I lit a match. The paper caught fire, flames licking upwards like snakes, consuming her name. I watched it burn completely, not because I wanted to forget, but because I wanted to remember the exact moment I let go. I couldn't erase the pain, but I could use it to move forward. The next morning, I went back to the room, opened the laptop, and sent an encrypted message to one person, a former operative I'd helped clear his name nearly 8 years ago. His name was Rafe Mendoza. He was better at tracking finances and anonymous transfers than anyone I knew. I simply wrote, "Need to trace funds, Claire Mercer, December, first year I was gone." Less than 2 minutes later, he replied, she received an $85K deposit from a fund named Helix Advanced Logistics. Front, leads to Crane. Helix Advance. Sounded like a pharmaceutical transport company, but it was a known network for channeling off-the-books project funds. I typed back, and Jude, Rafe responded. Same month, he received special commendation promotion, granted red layer access in military systems. I stared at the messages, my heart pounding like a drum. It was all set up. I was removed so someone else could take my place, not just in the unit, but in my personal life too. Jude didn't just steal my position. He replaced me as the soldier, the husband, the father, and Claire allowed it to happen. I didn't know if they truly loved each other, but I knew, in the moment they signed their names to my erasure, they chose each other, and nothing could change that fact. I sat back down in front of the screen, hands steady now, eyes clear. The chaos inside me settled. I had my target. Now it's time to plan. I hit a key, bringing up a map of the city where I used to live. Coordinates 1477, my old address with Claire. Now was Jude's home. I entered it into a tracking device, set a location schedule. Not to do anything immediately. I just wanted to know, while they slept, while they laughed, while they thought they'd erased the past, how close the ghost they'd buried alive was standing. And the truth was just waiting for its day to break ground. I found Mira in an old garage on the outskirts of Denver. She lived behind a cover as thin as dust on a car window. Hard to see, but once you touched it, you knew it was something you couldn't just wipe clean. Mira Carter was a freelance hacker. No affiliações, no contracts, no strings. Years ago, she'd supposedly been hired to crack a satellite system the government couldn't touch, and did it in under 36 hours. People said she had no professional ethics, but I knew one thing for sure. she had lines. And once she decided to be on your side, she wouldn't bail. I didn't ask her for anything except the one thing I needed, to open the doors I no longer had keys to. The evening I arrived, she was perched on a swivel chair, screens glowing blue all around her. Her hair was messy, tied back loosely, an old t-shirt sporting a cigarette burn near the hem. Mira didn't ask where I came from. She just glanced up once, then turned back to her keyboard. "How deep do you need to go?" I replied. "Deep enough to reach where they think no one dares to dig." She said nothing more, just pulled out her earbuds, opened a new window, and started typing. I stood behind her, not interfering. The screen flickered through layers of encryption, each line a lock Mira peeled back like snakeskin. An hour later, we were inside CENTCOM's internal data repository. Mira sat quietly for a moment, eyes fixed on a file marked CB HVSD06. "Blue Harvest," she murmured. I nodded. She clicked the file open. A list appeared. Names, identifiers, operational timelines, statuses. There were brief notes, so short they seemed meaningless. But as she filtered the data, one video file stood out. No title, no description, just a timestamp. 6 weeks before I shipped out. Mira hit play. The video opened with a blurry angle, but clear enough to recognize the inside of a SEAL base. A place only insiders could access. I knew it. The Strategic Information Coordination Room, down the west corridor of Bravo Base. In the video, Claire walked in. Alone, wearing a white blouse, dark pants, carrying a paper bag like she was just dropping off lunch. But she didn't go to my office. She stopped outside the data storage room door. A secondary camera caught the moment she glanced around quickly, then pulled a swipe card from her pocket. The door opened. She stepped inside. 3 minutes. No more. Then she came out, face unchanged, and walked straight out of frame. I stood frozen like stone. A metallic, salty taste filled my throat. 3 minutes. Enough time to plant malware. Enough time to pave the way for a plan. Enough time to turn me into a target. Mira stopped the video, looked at me. Her eyes held no pity, just confirmation. I thought maybe she got pulled into it later, I said, my voice thick. Turns out, she was the one who opened the door from the start. Mira was silent for a beat, then opened another file. Inside was a string of encrypted messages between 2 accounts. One labeled Mercer NT, the other, nameless, just marked Red Watch. The last line of that conversation stopped my heart. Target Graves will be off radar within 48 hours. No body, no proof, no body, no proof. I sank into a chair, feeling utterly drained. Claire didn't just help. She knew everything, and she agreed to let it happen. I whispered. She knew I wouldn't fight back because I still loved her. Mira typed a few more commands. She found an audio log in the system. Claire's voice from an internal meeting. Her voice was clear, unwavering. Subject exhibits tendencies toward order compliance, unlikely to resist elimination protocols. Recommend full biometric data scrub and identifier deletion. I shut off the file right there. I didn't need to hear any more. Mira looked at me for a moment, then asked softly, "Want to hear the unedited raw audio?" I shook my head. No, I don't need to hear her lie one more time. Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of cooling fans. I stared at the screen, at the copy of my own file, with the final 2 words next to my status. Erased, approved. I stood up, pulled a USB drive from my pocket. "Mira, back everything up, but don't release it." "Not yet." She nodded. "So what do you want to do?" I replied. "I want them to know I'm still here." That night, back in my motel room, before sleep, I opened an old photo of Claire from a camping trip in Montana. She was wearing my hoodie, hair messy, a half smile on her face because of the cold. I looked at it for a long time, then whispered, like a farewell, "Goodbye, who I used to love. You erased my name, but you couldn't erase the memories." I closed the laptop. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin. Not with guns, but with the truth. The sky over suburban Maryland that night seemed to pour all its silence into a thin layer of clouds stretched across the moon. No cars, no barking dogs, just the steady beat echoing in my earpiece. The pulse of a thermal detection system. I was standing in the woods about 30 yards from a small house. It was tucked behind an old warehouse complex, no number, no address. But all the data pointed here. Claire was being held inside. An anonymous video had hit Myra's inbox at 0200 No subject line, just a 15-second clip. In it, Claire was tied to a metal chair, head bowed, blood trickling from her temple. A man's voice spoke from behind the camera. If Graves keeps digging, she'll have nothing left to lose. I didn't know who sent it, but I knew one thing for sure. They'd miscalculated. I wasn't stopping, and if they thought taking Claire would make me back down, they didn't understand how far I'd already gone. I checked my weapon, knife, lock-picking kit, and a small signal jammer. Everything fit neatly in the black backpack slung over one shoulder. In my ear, Myra's voice was a cold whisper. 8 heat signatures. 7 moving, 1 stationary. Likely Claire. You have 20 minutes before their backup systems detect me. I only need 15, I replied, stepping out of the tree line. I approached from the west, where a section of rusty fence had been cut. They thought no one would find this place, so the security wasn't professional, just hired muscle. Guys who thought a monthly paycheck and nighttime sunglasses were enough to hide how cheap they really were. The first one patrolled around the warehouse, a cigarette dangling from his lips. I came up behind him, hand clamping over his mouth, pulling him down gently like calming a wild animal. No sound, no blood. The second guy stood in the hallway, back against the wall, 1 foot propped on a crate. I tossed a small rock into the opposite corner. He turned his head reflexively, just long enough for me to close the distance, lock his arm, and take him down. No alarm raised. I moved through the narrow corridor, where flickering fluorescent lights on the ceiling seemed to be dying. The smell of dampness and machine oil mingled, creating the feeling of entering a forgotten world, still filled with danger. The last door was on the right, secured with a fingerprint scanner. I pulled the bypass kit from my bag, plugged the connector into the panel, counting down in my head, 15 seconds to decode, 10 to trip the mechanical lock. 17 seconds later, the door clicked open. Claire was there. She sat in a small room, just big enough for a table, a chair, and a single bare bulb dangling overhead. Her wrists were bound behind her, dried blood matted in her hair. One eye was bruised shut, lips cracked. I stepped inside. She looked up, eyes wide, not with surprise, but with disbelief. "You actually came." Her voice was trembling, hoarse. I didn't answer. I cut the ropes, helped her to her feet. She swayed, leaning against me. "They said you wouldn't come. They said you hated me." "I didn't come for you," I said quietly. She froze as if slapped. Her eyes searched mine for a flicker of emotion, but I kept my face blank. "I came for my own conscience. I don't let people finish someone off the way you let them finish me." I didn't need to say more. She understood, and she lowered her head, not arguing. An alarm siren started wailing in the distance. Mira yelled in my ear, "You're compromised. They're closing in from the east." I pulled Claire onto my shoulder and ran for the secondary exit I'd prepped. The back door of the warehouse led to an old storm drain tunnel. Damp, reeking of algae and sewage, but wide enough to squeeze through to the empty lot beyond. Footsteps pounded behind us. Someone fired, a bullet ricocheting off the concrete wall, sparking. Claire gasped, her hand tightening on my shoulder. We reached the rendezvous point. An old pickup truck was waiting. I threw Claire into the passenger seat, gunned the engine, and tore off into the thick fog of the approaching dawn. No one spoke the entire drive back. Only ragged breathing, the growl of the engine, and a silence that stretched like a waiting knife. Back at the safe house, I didn't look at her. I guided her to a small room with a bed, an ice pack, and some bandages. Then I turned to leave. She called after me. "Nathan, why didn't you ask me why?" I stopped at the door. Didn't turn around, because I'm not sure I want the answer. What would knowing change? Her voice choked. I didn't have a choice. They forced me to sign. If I didn't, they would have. I turned back then, meeting her gaze directly for the first time. They would have what? Killed me? You think signing off on my death first was protecting me? She flinched as if struck. No, I thought if I could control when and how you disappeared, maybe I could keep some part of you for myself. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. What did you keep? A ring? A photograph? Or my daughter, growing up never knowing her father's face? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I stepped out of the room, closing the door behind me. Leaned my back against the wall, eyes shut tight. My heart wasn't racing anymore, just a faint echo in my head, Words I'd spoken on our last night before I left for that final mission. Whatever happens, I won't let you disappear into the dark. I kept my word, but not for love, because I needed a living witness to everything they had done. And this time, I wasn't letting anyone die in my place. It rained all night. The kind of rain that isn't a downpour, but a steady, cold drizzle, as if the sky itself was tired of holding on to something unspeakable. Claire sat alone in the small room of the safe house. The only light came from the reading lamp beside the bed, casting long shadows on her sorrowful face. Her eyes were swollen, hair tangled, but strangely, her expression was no longer panicked. It was oddly calm, as if she'd stopped fighting against all the reasons, even against herself. I stood outside the door, leaning against the wall, listening to the rain tap on the tin roof. My mind was a blank slate. No plans, no data, just the same unanswered questions looping endlessly. Finally, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Claire didn't turn around. I sat down on the wooden chair opposite her. There was just enough space between us, enough not to touch, and enough to feel the cold seeping in from the slightly open window. "Do you want to hear the truth?" she asked, her voice thin and raspy like lingering smoke. I didn't answer immediately, just gave a slight nod. She looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time since the rescue. Hers were brimming with tears, but none fell. "When you were called up for that last mission, I thought it was a chance for us to have some space. Not because I wanted you gone, but because things between us were so strained. You were always living ready to disappear at any moment. For an operation, for an order, for something bigger than both of us." I remained silent. I didn't blame you. I understood. That's who you are. I loved you for that. But do you know what it feels like, knowing every time you walk out, that door might be the last? Every closed door was when I didn't know if it would ever open again. Her voice started to tremble. Then Jude came. His name made the air in the room feel heavy. At first, he was just filling in for you in the unit. But then he started filling the spaces you left behind too. Not with love, no, but with presence. By being there when I stumbled, by listening when I was tired, and when they told me you were missing. I didn't react the way people expected. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just sat there, silent, because for a moment, I realized I'd seen it coming for a long time. I felt hollow, as if her words couldn't reach me anymore. But what I didn't expect was that they'd make me sign a paper confirming that the man I once loved, the man I promised to wait for, had to be wiped clean. Not because I wanted you gone, Nathan, but because I was so tired of trying to hold on to you when the whole world wanted to push you away. She looked straight at me, her voice breaking. I was wrong. I thought if I signed, I could protect the memory of you I had left. But in the end, I betrayed not just you, but the good part of myself too. I sat quietly, looking down at my hands. Calloused, cracked fingers that had saved lives, pulled triggers, trembled when they first touched this woman's cheek the night I first knew what love was. Now they just lay still, numb. "I wasn't invisible, Claire," I said, my voice so low it was barely audible. "I existed in flesh, blood, and pain. And you signed your name to deny all of it." She broke down, sobbing. I know better than anyone. Every night, every morning when I look at our daughter, I ask myself, is she your blood? And if she is, what did I do to the man who gave her life? I looked up. Our eyes met. No longer lovers, no longer betrayer and victim. Just two people who had traveled too far from the point where anything could be fixed. "Is Lena my daughter?" I asked. Claire went still, then nodded. "Yes." I closed my eyes, felt the world stop turning. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared. Scared that if I told you, you'd come back. And if you came back, I could never look you in the eye and confess what I'd done." A long silence followed. I stood up, walked towards the door. Claire called after me, her voice trembling. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know, for a very long time, I loved you with all my heart." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "I used to think so too, Claire." I opened the door, but we're not us anymore. The door closed behind me, and for the first time in years, I didn't carry anger in my heart. Only emptiness, like a fire that had burned down to the last ember, leaving only ash. Maybe that was the first step towards release. Sometimes, the truth doesn't reveal itself like an explosion or a curtain being ripped away. It comes like a drizzle, quiet and steady, soaking into your skin until you realize you've been wet for a while. After the final conversation with Claire, I didn't go back to the safe house. Not out of anger, but because I needed space to separate myself from the name she'd called me for 10 years. Husband, soldier, the man she'd once said would always come home. I found Mira one overcast morning, mist still clinging to the windshield of the old truck I borrowed. Mira was in the basement apartment she rented under a fake name, a place small enough to go unnoticed and secure enough to hold all the secrets a system had tried to bury. Mira opened the door after my 3-knock signal. Without much talk, she pointed towards the desk, where screens displayed shimmering lines of code like lights in a tunnel. I sat down, pulling my chair closer. "Took me 2 weeks to crack this 6th layer," Mira said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "Blue Harvest isn't just an operation. It's a platform." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it wasn't created for one mission. It was built to handle everything the military didn't want its hands dirty with: scrubbing records, rewriting histories, re-identifying targets, and if necessary, turning a living person into a name that never existed." I clenched my fists. Mira opened a file, dragging it onto the main screen. A complex diagram appeared, a spiderweb with red nodes connected by blinking blue lines. "This is Blue Harvest's tiered system," she explained. "Tier 1, threat identification. Tier 2, profiling. Tier 3, personal data manipulation. Tier 4, physical action, meaning termination, induced accidents, or making someone disappear." Each time she clicked a node, a name appeared, a face, a reason: knew too much, refused cooperation, contacted press. And there, at the center of the web, was a large black box. When Mira clicked it, the name appeared: Victor Crane. Below, it was a strange identifier, not a standard military ID, but an international coordination code. Mira glanced at me. "You know what happens when the final signatory on an operation is also the guy overseeing the entire system?" I nodded, my gut sinking. No one's watching him anymore. Mira turned back to the screen. "We could leak everything, but if we just dump the files, they'll call it fake. Or worse, someone else will take the fall for him." I exhaled slowly. "So we need undeniable proof." She nodded. "And I just found it." Mira opened a folder marked failsafes. Inside were audio recordings, video files, photos of documents. One clip opened: Crane, sitting in a darkened conference room, speaking via video call to someone whose image was blurred. "If Graves is alive, everything falls apart. There's no other option. Clean it up." His voice was deep and clear, unmistakable. Next was an audio recording of a meeting between Crane, Jude Mercer, and a third person I guess was a regional director. Claire signed off. "Everything's ready. You sure she won't flip?" She chose our side. What's left to doubt? I looked at Mira. She said nothing, just handed me a small, black hard drive, marked with a 5-pointed star that had a slash through it. "It's all here. If you release this, everything blows up." I took the drive. It felt light, but in my hand, it weighed like a death sentence. "What are you going to do?" Mira asked. I looked up at the ceiling, then back at her. "I'm sending it to 4 places: the press, Congress, a human rights organization, and a veterans community platform. No commentary. Just let them see for themselves." "You don't want to say anything yourself?" I shook my head. "They don't need to know who I am. They just need to know the truth was buried alive." Mira nodded slightly. Then she turned back to her desk, programming again. I knew she was writing a countdown code. Once activated, the system would automatically send the files to the right addresses at the right time. When the screen flashed, ready for launch, I placed my hand on the mouse. A moment of silence hung in the air. I thought of Claire, of Lena, of the names on the list we'd just seen, people who no longer had a voice. And then I clicked. The screen went black. A single line appeared, blinking softly. "Upload initiated." I stood up, looked at Mira. "Thanks." She shrugged. "I didn't help you for you. I helped because I know some systems are just waiting for someone to flip the switch so they can collapse on themselves." I left the basement as dawn was breaking. The first light cut through the pale gray sky, piercing the last remnants of rain clinging to the rooftops. A new day was beginning. But this time, it started not with guns, not with blood, but with the truth. I left Myra's place around noon, carrying a small backpack and an empty hard drive. The heavy black drive from yesterday was gone, split into 4 copies, and in less than 24 hours, it had done exactly what I expected, shaken every layer of power that Blue Harvest had draped in a false mask. The news exploded like wildfire across dry fields. Initial reports were cautious, calling it allegations or unverified leaks, but overnight, the images, voices, and document from the drive spread across every platform. I saw Victor Crane's face on a screen in an old roadside TV shop. For the first time, not under the glow of ceremonial lights, but under scrolling text. Former defense official accused a manipulating operation to eliminate service members. Soon after, Jude Mercer was summoned. I recognized the bewildered look in his eyes as reporters swarmed him. Not guilt, but disbelief that the shadow he thought buried in the sand had returned. And Claire, she vanished. No statement, no appearances, not a word of explanation. Maybe she understood there was nothing left to say. Or maybe she knew. Sometimes silence is the deepest punishment for someone who once used their voice to destroy a person. I headed north. No specific route. Sometimes staying in a lakeside cabin, sometimes sleeping in my car at deserted gas stations. I didn't need to hide, but I didn't want to stay still either. I was no longer Nathan Cole from the military records. No longer the soldier. No longer the target marked for elimination. I was just a survivor, trying to figure out what that really meant. One afternoon, I stopped in a coastal town in Oregon. It was so quiet you could hear each wave break on the shore like the steady breathing of a giant, sleeping beast. I rented a simple wooden cabin with a window facing the sea. No Wi-Fi, no TV, just salt wind and sudden showers. I carried only one thing besides clothes. The old ring Claire had left behind in the safe house. The one she wore at our wedding, the day I looked into her eyes and believed my life had found its anchor. Now, it rested in my palm, heavy as an undeniable truth. I didn't throw it away, didn't keep it aware. I placed it on the windowsill each morning. Let the sunlight pass through it. Let the night dew settle on it. Let time touch it, just as it had touched me. A week later, as the Blue Harvest scandal began to quiet down in the media, I found myself sitting alone on the beach at dawn. Before me was the vast ocean, immense and borderless. Someone once asked me why the sea brings such peace. I think it's because the sea takes no sides. It swallows everything. Equally, I took off my shoes, let my bare feet sink into the cool, damp sand, and walked slowly towards the water's edge. Waves curled around my ankles like ancient fingers, pulling me toward a memory I'd never truly let go of. I remember the day Claire found out she was pregnant. She didn't cry. She wasn't overjoyed. She just looked at me, hand on her belly, and whispered, "I don't know if I'll be good at this. But I know, if this child carries half of you, it'll have the strength to get through anything." I believed it then. Now, I wasn't sure. I sat down on the sand, leaning against a smooth rock. The sun began to rise above the horizon, slowly, as if it too was hesitant. I took the ring from my pocket, looked at it one last time. The old gold gleamed with the orange tint of dawn. Inside the band, the faded inscription still read, "To come home." I wasn't going home, and Claire was no longer the one keeping the door. I closed my hand around the ring, squeezing gently, then stood up and walked deeper into the water. Cold waves splashed against my knees, then my thighs, then my waist. When I was deep enough, I opened my hand. The ring fell. No sound. No flash of light. It just dropped like something that no longer belonged to me. I turned back towards the shore. No tears. No regrets. Just a strange feeling, like I'd finally set down a weight I'd carried for too long. That afternoon, I walked into a small coffee shop near the bay. Blue-painted wooden door, a slightly crooked handwritten sign, the smell of baked goods and soft jazz inside. I ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and sat at a table by the window. A little later, a young man walked in. Early 20s maybe, neat haircut, military-style backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked around, then sat at the table next to mine. His phone was open to a news article. Headline, "Who is the Blue Harvest whistleblower? Former SEAL or media ghost?" He stared intently. Our eyes met. The young man hesitated, then asked, "Are you Graves?" I didn't answer right away, then gave a slight nod. I was Army. Got transferred to logistics, Almost got pulled into a program linked to Blue Harvest. If it wasn't for that data drop, I might be another erase name right now. I looked at him. There was gratitude in his eyes, but more than that, awareness. Thank you, sir. I nodded. Said nothing more. When he left, I watched him go. His walk was still a bit stiff, like he was still learning how to be free after years of carrying a gun for a twisted ideal. I turned back to my coffee, cold now. But I drank it anyway, because sometimes cold things remind you that you can still feel. I don't know where I'll be tomorrow. Maybe head for the mountains. Maybe down to the desert. I don't have a plan, only a belief that the truth, however late it arrives, is the only thing that can pull a person back from the abyss. I'm proof of that, not because I won, but because I'm still alive. And my silence was loud enough to make a system tremble.